What's going on, guys? Charles Ceritho here, and look what behind me is. Holy moly. We've come a long way from the things behind us, which are SR20s and 240s. And this is Matt's 2016 Porsche GT3-RS 991.1 edition. And we're gonna be making this thing a lot louder because he wants this thing to sound like the real RS-R race car. We are replacing it with a Soul Performance Competition exhaust package. So what does that come with? That comes with side muffler deletes that does have valve. So the exhaust is still valved, and then as well as the center section delete. So it is a straight pipe from the catalytic converters all the way to the center pipe. But let's get started, guys, and let's hear what this Porsche sounds like.
Okay, so first step, we're going to remove the bottom engine cover. This has 11 T30 Torx bolts. Just remove them one at a time. Leave one at the end so that you can help yourself take them down if you don't have a friend to help you hold it up. Okay, so we are going to be disconnecting the battery prior to unplugging any sensors in the car so that we don't have any check lights when we turn it back on. In the fender well here, the lower two Torx bits are going to be a T30 and the upper two are going to be a T25. Once that's complete, on the far inner fender well against the engine compartment, there is a 10mm nut that we'll be removing, and that will allow us to remove this corner trim and get to this top Torx bit in the corner of the bumper. All right, so now that we've removed these top two T25 Torxes, you should be able to move this fender liner trim back just enough to get to the last T30, which will be in the corner of the bumper. All right, moving around to the other side, same thing. Two T25s, three T30s, and the 10mm on the inside. Okay, so on the bottom here, you're gonna have 6 more T30s all along the perimeter of the bumper. We need to remove all of those. We're gonna go back top side and remove the rear tail lights and the top bolts from the bumper. Okay, so now that we're top side, next step is to remove the tail lights. These are 2 T25 Torx bolts right here, and then the tail light will pull directly back and we can unplug it. After we have both tail lights removed, we'll remove these 4 T30s on the top of the bumper, and then we can begin to remove the bumper. Removing this light, flipping it over, we can see our connector. This gets pried back while you wiggle it. Shouldn't be too hard. Set these off in a safe place. Okay, now with our tail lights out, we've obviously got these 4 we just talked about, and then the final 2 are right in the corner of the tail light. That's why the tail light actually needs to be removed. All right, the final step before we pull the bumper cover is the license plate light. You can actually disconnect it in the car. We can't really show it, but once the bumper is off, I will show you guys the connector. So this is your connector. You just pull back on the clip with your nail or your finger, and it'll disengage. All right, so we're starting to remove this side underpaneling. You're gonna have 2 10mm nuts at the top here by the fender. We will have 4 T30 Torx bolts. And the final one, you will need a roughly 6 or 8 inch extension to reach. And provided you got all the inner fender hardware taken apart earlier, you will be able to remove it from there. All right, for the next step, we're gonna remove the crash beam. This has 3 13mm bolts on either side. This will allow us to pull the whole heat shield and crash beam at once. Next thing we're gonna do, we're moving on to the exhaust removal. we're gonna cut the clamps on the vacuum line for the actuators. These can't be reused. Once that clamp has been cut, you can remove the line from the hose. All right, next we're gonna be removing our side mufflers from the center muffler. These are a 13 millimeter, and a swivel will help you access the ones in the back. Moving on, now that we have the center section disconnected, we're gonna be removing the clamps from the back of the cats. These are a 6 millimeter Allen. I'm just gonna remove the bolt all the way. That way these are free to come off of the cats once we get the brackets off. All right, last thing to remove these side mufflers is these brackets. These are an E12 external Torx bit. Grab yourself a nice long extension so you can get in there through the mufflers to remove these 2 bolts on each side. So we have everything disconnected except the connections to the cats on the side. Actually gonna pull the center section before the sides, which is gonna allow us to sneak these out without pulling the upper air boxes. So we need to take the center section out is remove these 2 17 millimeter nuts behind the back. Sorry, they're 16 millimeter nuts. Once I remove those, I should be able to sneak the center section out, and then we'll be able to pull those side sections out without removing the intakes. There's a third 16 millimeter you can see up over the top of the muffler. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that with a wrench as well. Could probably get a socket with a swivel in here. So we have everything disconnected from the sides. We've got the center section loosened up, and we should be able to sneak our side mufflers out now. Once you've got it out, you're gonna need to swivel the bracket, and then we can sneak it past the cats. Look at that monster. So not only is our new exhaust gonna sound great, but this is gonna be a dramatic weight savings. All right, we're gonna use our 6 millimeter Allen to loosen these clamps on the exhaust hangers. And once we get this one loose, the muffler will be free. All right, so we are fully disassembled. I'm gonna tighten these bolts back up on this old bracket for the stock muffler. This is retained on the car. And then we'll get to installing our new Soul Performance exhaust. All right, we are starting our reassembly by mounting our inner hangers that are provided with the Soul Performance exhaust. These are gonna use the OEM fasteners to the engine block. Just to go over what we've got, I've assembled the 2 side muffler bypasses with the center bypass section. I've got the brackets loosely attached on the center section, and then all of our clamps are on but not tight. I'm gonna get a hand with this, and I'm gonna put the exhaust up in place and start the bolts through these hangers, and then we'll align it with the 2 cats and get that all bolted up. Check center on the car, and I'll have to determine it once it's in place. We may tighten these clamps up after the bumper is back on, or we may have to do it before. I'll go over that in a few. Okay, so we are phoning a friend. He's gonna be starting the bolts on these hangers, and then once those are started, we'll align everything. All right, so I'm going along both sides, aiming the exhaust and tightening up these like flared clamps on the back of the cats, tightening them a little at a time. And then after this is completed, we'll center up, make sure the exhaust is centered up, and go ahead and tighten down the rest of the clamps. I have the connections to the cats tight, and basically with the other 4 connections on the exhaust still loose, you can center that, the middle section so that your tips line up with your bumper. I eyeballed it, center line on the car, and then we just briefly set the bumper back on just to verify that our tips are coming out centered before we tighten everything down. You can always make final adjustments once the bumper's on, but I want it to be pretty close before, so that we don't have to do as much work, or hopefully no work, once we get the car reassembled. All right, so I'm tightening up the brackets now. These are a 13 millimeter on both sides, so I just have a wrench and a socket. After I get these tight, I'm gonna tighten down the clamps on the exhaust. So we have our bolts tightened on the bracket. Now I'm tightening up the clamps of the bracket that actually hold the exhaust up. Basically, you just wanna make sure the bracket is mated to the exhaust well, even before you tighten it down, which it is. And now we'll tighten these down and make sure everything's nice and solid. By the way, these are also a 13 millimeter. We are getting close. I'm now tightening down the actual exhaust clamps. These are all 15 millimeter nuts, the 4 of them. We've got this thing pretty straight. If we end up needing to move it once the bumper's on, we'll have to re-loosen these guys and our hanger, just so that we'll be able to slide it left or right. Any vertical adjustment we need to make would need to have the brackets loosened and the clamps on the cats loosened back up as well. Also, just to note, I'm orienting all of these clamps to where they can be accessed from the bottom once we get the bumper on it. If you leave something up sideways, or you're gonna regret it if we need to make any adjustments after the car is reassembled. All right, so we are going to be using the provided vacuum line from Soul to extend the vacuum line to the new actuator location, which is a little longer. It looks like the line will be around 6 inches long. I'm just getting this pushed onto the OE hard line, and then we'll route it up to our actuators and cut to length. I don't want to leave too much slack on this because I want to keep it away from the cats to make sure this doesn't melt. Also provided from Soul are some cable ties. We'll use those to secure these on, make sure they don't come off. All right, so we are just about to start reassembly. I just threw the crash bar on right now. Everything's gonna be the reverse of what we took off. Once we get everything wrapped up, I'll go over aiming the tips, but we are on the home stretch now. All right, on to our final step. We are mounting the tips. Pretty straightforward. Make sure your bolts are on the outside of each other so that you can get to them to tighten them up. And then we're just gonna align these up in the center of the bumper hole and make sure they're straight. You can adjust these in or out a little bit depending on your preference. I'm gonna leave them hanging out, not all the way to the end, but kind of in the middle of their adjustment so that we get a little bit more of an aggressive look.
What's going on, guys? Charles back here at the beautiful Podium Club, which is really weird. You know, we have a really beautiful day right now, and behind me, we even have some more beautiful scenery. Is Maddie's 2016 Porsche GT3-RS, and now it is still valved. So he does have the valve still in it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start the car with the valves on, turn it off, and we're gonna do some revs. We've got this beautiful racetrack here where we're gonna do a bunch of sample videos so you guys can hear this system at absolutely full bore, no restrictions on a closed circuit. All right, guys, so we are in the GT3-RS right now, and it is a Memorial Day 3-day weekend, so little traffic here. We're just gonna take it easy. I think these tires probably have one heat cycle on them. Other than that, car is only modified with the exhaust on it, so we do lose the side mufflers and we do lose the main mufflers. It is the Soul Performance product. We do still retain the OEM cats, so no lights, no fuss.